Hello, I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, your weekly source for news, analysis, and commentary about Kansas and Wichita government and public affairs. We're broadcast on Great Plains Television. That's channel 26.1, Saturday and Sunday both. You can also find us on my site, that's the Voice for Liberty at wichitaliberty.org. You'll find this episode, show notes for this episode, all the old episodes of Wichita Liberty TV, plus all the other content that I and others create on nearly a daily basis. So that's the Voice for Liberty at wichitaliberty.org. So as you know, we've got some primary elections coming up. We've talked about it quite a bit, Carl. We've had 3 of the Republican governor candidates here, and now we're turning our attention to something much more local, which is Sedgwick County District 4. There are Democratic candidates running against each other and also 2 Republicans running against each other in the August primary. Sedgwick County Commission District 4 includes downtown Wichita, north central, northeast Wichita, the towns of Mays, Valley Center, Park City, and rural areas in between, I think. Currently represented by our guest today, Richard Ranzau. I wanted to have a broader discussion about this, and so I invited the opponent, Hugh Nix, to appear or to send a surrogate. I also invited members of the Wichita Chamber of Commerce Political Action Committee, or PAC, because they're involved in this race quite a bit. They've been doing radio advertising and also mail advertising against Richard and in favor of Hugh Nix, the opponent. Some of these people replied back and said, no, we won't appear. Others simply did not reply, except Richard Ranzau did agree to come, as he has in the past. So, Richard Ranzau, welcome to Wichita Liberty TV.
Thank you very much, Bob. Happy to be here.
So, some of these claims that the Wichita Chamber has made, both on a radio advertisement and a print mailing that they've made, some of them are just plain incorrect, unfactual, okay, we'll say a lie, and others are taking something you said and just torturing the heck out of it in order to come up with something. For example, on Facebook, Hugh Nix is saying, or someone on behalf of Hugh Nix, we don't know, Richard Ranzau has spent the last 8 years saying no to our safety, voting against support for law enforcement, and immediately after that, there was a link to an article from the Wichita Business Journal that the sole subject of that was the Wichita State University Law Enforcement Training Center, which opened not very long ago, I think. And the truth of it is that article reports that you and all the other commissioners tabled the idea, which is saying, let's delay it to some other time. And the very next week, there was a en banc meeting, that's French for joint meeting, between the Wichita City Council and the Sedgwick County Commission, because jointly they were paying for it. They approved it, and then at the Sedgwick County Commission meeting the very next day, everybody approved it there also as well. So why is the Nix campaign, how do they get that you voted against the Law Enforcement Training Center?
Bob, I can't really explain that. It's one of the, it really is a lie. It's, I think they're desperate. I think they think I'm winning, and so they have to attack me with lies and hope that people won't know the truth. The fact is, when I was a chairman, there were 2 projects that
You were chair what time?
In 2015.
And so the chair of the commission, if I could clarify, is selected by the members of commission, and it kind of rotates around. Different from the Wichita City Council, where the mayor is the chair, so to speak, but he's elected by the voters of the city. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right, and we run the meetings and help set the agenda. But anyway, there were 2 things I wanted to get done as chairman. One was the Law Enforcement Training Center, and 2 was a new tag office. Mm-hmm. I actually initiated the Law Enforcement Training Center when I was a chairman. My first meeting with Mayor Longwell, I said, Mayor, we need to get this Joint Law Enforcement Training Center done. I made the suggestion that we use the county's RFP process, and we would take the lead on this and get things going. A month later, he came back and said, yes, let's do it. So we moved forward. You know, it took a while to go through the process, but I'm very proud of the work that we've done and we're able to accomplish, and the new facility. I never voted no against it. I was an ardent supporter of this. So I just think this is, you know, a desperate act, but I can't explain it.
Now, you weren't exactly, well, you had a few reservations. For example, whoever did not accept the lowest bid. Is that right?
That's correct. There were 4 bids, and the bid that we accepted was $3 million more than what I thought the best proposal was. And so we had some negotiating going on with the city. Commissioner Howell at the time was very involved in trying to get us an agreement so that we could do some joint law enforcement training center in exchange for the added expense of the project. But that was about the details and the cost. And there again, I never voted no on anything. It was all negotiating. We had the en banc meeting and we settled on it, and we all voted yes. It was actually 12-0, and we moved forward with it.
Interesting. So again, I just can't understand why someone on the next page, and I think the chamber might have even alluded to this, that you were not interested in public safety. So,
well,
Carl,
in fact, the radio commercials indicated that, Bob.
Yeah, so Carl, I know you've got some opinion here, but we are over time for our first segment. Let's take a moment off. We'll be right back with more Wichita Liberty TV. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. Our guest this week, Richard Ranzau. We had hoped to have other candidates and interested parties for the Sedgwick County Commission District 4 race, but none would appear. So, Carl, of course, you have a lot of knowledge and perspective on this, having served on the commission for 8 years, some overlapping with Richard. And thanks for being back from vacation. And I thought that episode of you and former Commissioner Parks was really very good, I think. So thank you for that, Carl.
Thanks, Bob. Commissioner Ranzau, one of the other criticisms that the chamber's made in their radio spots is attacking you for trying to take over annex businesses, that you're anti-economic development. What's the basis for this charge, and how do you respond to it?
Well, this is another incredible charge, because what they're saying is that I suggested that the city should annex a part of Spirit in order that the city could get more taxes, but that's not the case.
This would have been the section of land on which this new, the new jobs will be, the new distribution center, I think it is, isn't it?
Right, and I actually think it's the whole tract of Spirit, but nevertheless, they're in a special district that saves them about $500,000 a year. So over the course of the project, they were talking about saving, it would save them about $10 million. So all I was saying is, this exists, the taxpayer should get credit for it, just like some other things that I brought up. But I never suggested that the city of Wichita should annex them to get more money, so they're just distorting what I said, and it's just unbelievable.
Well, another criticism you've faced is that you're against health in this community, and some of the budgetary changes in the operation of the county health department. Are we spending enough, and are we spending it well in the health department? I
think we've made some good changes, actually. We're seeing more people than we ever have, and really one of the biggest charges I get, and the one that brings the most emotion, in fact, has been brought up in a couple forums here recently, is WIC. There's still this idea out there that we cut WIC.
So WIC is Women, Infants, Children. It's a federal program, is it? Probably in cooperating with states and counties and so forth.
Right.
Where pregnant women with very young children, they can go to the grocery store and get free food.
Right, it's funded by the federal government, but the money goes down to the state, and then the state pays the county to administer the program.
Okay.
All we do is we have people fill out the paperwork and everything and make sure they're eligible, and then we send it up to the state, and then the state sends out the checks. Well, every year we had been requesting more money than what we actually needed. This was kind of a habitual thing, and a few years ago we decided to only request the amount of money that we needed, and I'm talking about administrative costs, the money we need to administer the program. I think it was around $1.8 million is what we requested.
Something like that.
We could have requested an additional $320,000, but we knew that we wouldn't need it, and we just have to end up sending it back at the end of the year.
Because during that time, and I think even now, the number of participants in WIC is slowly declining, I think in response to an improving economy.
Right. Well, over the last several years, nationwide, it's gone down quite a bit. But the general misconception is that we actually cut benefits, and we didn't. We just used the amount of money necessary to administer this program, release the rest of the money, No one lost their WIC. No one got cut from WIC. Everything went exactly the same way. We were just more fiscally prudent with the amount of money we use for administrative costs.
And the amount of money that, let's say, a woman with 2 children or whatever can get, does the county set that benefit, or does someone else?
No, that's through the state and the federal government. Like I say, we just help people fill out the paperwork. We send it to the state, and the state issues the check and makes all that determination.
And I think the unfortunate thing is because many of these recipients, but not all of them, might be minority members. Although white poverty, there's a great deal of that too. So people say, well, Richard Ranzau is racist because he voted against feeding brown and black babies.
Well, that's exactly right. It throws emotion into it because people don't understand the facts, and it's really sad. It really, I think, hurts our community because we can't have an honest dialogue about spending taxpayer dollars. And like I say, this had nothing to do with race or ethnicity. We had make no decision about who gets it and how much. It was purely about how much we were going to spend to administer the program.
And some people were critical because they say, well, I mean, that's not really our money. It's the federal government's money, so who really cares?
Well, I mean, we still have an obligation to be fiscally responsible with taxpayer money. Why tie up $300,000 for a year unnecessarily?
And here, Hugh Nix, I notice on one of his values, bullet points, he says, be conservative with finances. So that sounds like what you did.
I think you should vote for me.
Me too. Yeah. Or at least explain in more detail why. I do think at the recent forum where this came up, Hugh Nix says, when it comes to women and children, there should be no politics. But first of all, you didn't take anything away from them.
Right.
And second of all, a government program is politics. I mean, there's no way of separating the two. So
Right.
We do have to think about that. So here we are at halftime for today's episode of Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks with Carl, Peter, John, Richard Ranzau. We'll be right back. Welcome back again to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks, co-host Carl, Peter, John, here discussing issues in Sedgwick County and specifically District 4 today. The only candidate or group that would appear is the incumbent Richard Ranzau. So, Richard, returning to the Spirit Aero System things, there was a lot of subsidy that Spirit received from a variety of governments, the state of Kansas, the city of Wichita, and Sedgwick County. Some of the subsidy that the county participated in was a cash grant, but the other ways the county participated was in not agreeing to foul up the industrial revenue bonds that provide Spirit with millions of dollars of taxes that would otherwise go to you, and sales tax benefits and other benefits at the state as well. Nonetheless, you voted against that Spirit incentive package. And some people have said, you know, it would only cost the county $700,000 a year for 10 years, I think it was, but yet we're going to get billions of dollars back in. So they say 700,000 versus billions, but it's not quite that simple, is it?
No, it's not. First of all, the total incentive package that they're going to get was over $100 million, and we don't actually know the total amount because the state hasn't released all of their numbers.
And they never will. Some of these programs that funnel millions of dollars to companies in Kansas are designed to be opaque.
Right, and the calculations and the return on investment, however, was only based upon $40 million of incentives and tax abatements, and that was part of my argument. I tried to say the taxpayers should get credit for all of it. But nevertheless, out of that $100 million, $7 million was cash. Cash that actually we're going to have to borrow and pay interest on, and for the next 10 years pay $790,000.
So that's the principal plus some interest
Yep.
there. Okay, so it's almost $800,000.
Almost $800,000 a year. We'll have less to put in these core services that everybody relies on. Now here, the problem is I had no evidence that those jobs were contingent upon that cash. In fact, I asked a representative from the Greater Wichita Partnership, and I said, are you telling me that if we don't give them this cash, that these jobs won't be here? And he said, well, no, I can't say that, but they have a responsibility to their shareholders. And one of my commissioner colleagues said, well, we need to do this to show that we care. Well, I care about Spirit, but I also care about the taxpayers. I care about telling the whole story. The jobs were already coming. They're already hiring people when they asked for this $7 million in cash. And actually, we're going to use that cash. We're going to enter into a partnership and build a building for them, something that was unprecedented and had never been done before. And after I did all my research, I realized it really wasn't necessary. It's one of those things that they asked for and they got it because they knew they could.
Because who wants to be in office and vote again when Boeing leaves town? Well, you know, a current mayor candidate, Carl Brewer, he was surprised that after 30 years and over $600 million of tax breaks given to Boeing when Boeing and Spirit was together, that all of a sudden Boeing up and left. And the mayor was absolutely astonished, wasn't he?
Well, a lot of folks were astonished. There was a lot of disappointment, I think, in some of our federal delegation at that time.
Mike Pompeo.
But it goes to some of our U.S. senators,
Right.
I believe, made some very pointed comments that, if you look at the record, expressed their unhappiness with Boeing's departure. But that goes to another question that's been a continuing issue at the local and state level: transparency and concerns in terms of so much of these discussions, whether it's economic development or in other areas, the fairly controversial recent sale of some county property. Could you talk for a minute in terms of where you stand on transparency, and do we have enough of it in terms of transparency and open records?
Well, I think transparency is very important, and we actually have had some issues for the last year and a half at least, of commissioners trying to make deals behind the scenes for their friends, financial contributors. I've spoken publicly about that, and I really think it hurts our reputation. It hurts the community's trust and respect for the commission. It's something that I have fought against and will continue to fight against. Now, it's gotten me some enemies, so obviously some of my commissioner friends who I have taken a stand against and their financial contributors are then now trying to get me out of office. But I think it's very important for us to be able to trust our elected officials. Decisions like this need to be made in the open so they can hear the debate and hear the issues going on. I've actually been criticized by my opponent for actually doing that and having these public discussions, but I think it's absolutely mandatory for the health of our republic.
Well, there's a notable example that I can give. When you and Mr. Nix participated in a debate at the Wichita Pachyderm Club, that he said we've got to present a united front as a commission. We can't be arguing in front of staff and the voters. And to me, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that sounds like a return to the backroom deal.
Well, he actually made the comment when he was in private business, they made decisions behind closed doors, and then they came out and they didn't talk about it anymore.
And this is always what confuses me, is there are a lot of politicians all over who say, I've had a successful business career, I can make business-like decisions as a government official, from Donald Trump on down. But government's very different from business, and they're just entirely different types of things. Ludwig von Mises tells us that government cannot calculate profit. So how does it know if it's allocating resources efficiently as the private sector does? So we're going to take one more commercial break and be back in just a moment. Welcome back again to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. We've got co-host Carl Peterjohn. Richard Ranzau, Sedgwick County Commissioner and candidate for re-election. His opponent we could not reach. And one of the organizations that's really deeply involved in this race is the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. In particular, its Political Action Committee, although how much difference is there between the chamber and its PAC? I think not much. It's the same leadership and so forth. And the chamber's really whole hog in for Mr. Nix and very critical of you. And even Hugh Nix on his page spoke approvingly of the Chung report when James Chung was here. Now, I wrote about this morning. If you've ever followed James Chung, he's a former Wichitan, a Harvard-trained analyst who says Wichita is simply not growing, has not been growing at the time the national economy and other Midwest cities of comparable size and so forth are taking off. He says we need to change, but he won't say what we need to change, but I think there's two things. First of all, there's a lot of elected officials and bureaucrats that need to leave, and second of all, institutions like the Chamber of Commerce. Because, Carl, who's been responsible for driving economic development in Wichita for the past couple decades?
Well, the Chamber of Commerce has had their fingerprints on every group. I mean, currently we've got the partnership, but there are organizations that were going back to what used to be called WISE. There are a whole host
Greater
of
Wichita Economic Development Coalition.
I mean,
those were explicitly run by the Chamber, but this Wichita partnership, I mean, a lot of its executive leadership is the same as overlaps with the Wichita Chamber. So it's the Wichita Chamber that is the one constant across 2 decades of the decline of the Wichita economy, and they support Hugh Nix.
Yes, they do.
They also support higher taxes, too.
Well, yeah, in 2014, they ran the campaign for the new 1-cent sales tax in Wichita.
Right, and the driving force behind that was they wanted a slush fund in order to use this for
An economic development fund.
Economic development.
The sales tax was for other things too, but economic development, I think, was the Chamber's main interest, along with water.
Well, the problem is, you know, there's about 1,700 members in the chamber, about 25 members, though, in the PAC who make contributions and make the decisions.
$10,000 and $20,000 at a time.
Right,
a
and
lot.
they make decisions who they're going to support. And they basically have a litmus test for crony capitalism. If you don't support incentives, then you're going to be targeted. And I think that causes us to focus on the wrong things. I think we need to understand that 70 to 80% of the jobs are created by small businesses and entrepreneurs, and that's where I think we should put our focus, not the few elite politically connected businesses who demand massive tax subsidies, but the small mom and pop shops. That's why I've spent my time focusing on controlling spending and, in fact, controlling regulations that the county can control. What's interesting is that Gary Plummer, the head of the Wichita Chamber, actually told me that my list of accomplishments in the area of regulation was, in fact, very impressive. Those are the sorts of things that affect small businesses the most, but yet they decided to turn a blind eye to all those 1,700 small and medium-sized businesses and go with a candidate that would rubber stamp their incentive programs.
But Commissioner, the attack on you is that you're the commissioner who's against everything. You're Commissioner No. How could they defend a commissioner who's supposedly against everything?
Well, I'm against for real economic growth. Look at the federal level. What's the federal government doing? They reduce taxes, they're reducing regulation, and the economy is taking off. I say do the same thing here. I don't want any of this fake jobs or fake economic development when it's all just about taxpayer subsidies. Let's actually do something that actually works.
And I think that also, what's really funny about the Chamber is they were all in favor of higher taxes when they were going to get a big chunk of it to manage through the Economic Development Fund. They told us we had to have this fund, otherwise there'd never be another job in Wichita. Well, that's exaggerating, I'm sorry. But what happened? Wichita voters by 62% said no. So if the Chamber really thought that it was still necessary to have an economic development fund, there were other ways. They could have asked the city council members to approve higher property taxes. 4 out of 7 votes is all it took. They could have asked the Wichita City Council to hike franchise fees, which are really like sales taxes we pay on our water and cable and electric bills. Simple majority to do that. They could have lobbied the county commission for more taxes. They really didn't do any of that. They were willing to slough off to Wichita to make a decision, but wouldn't really stick up for it themselves.
Right. I think they kind of got it handed to them on that vote. Maybe they shrunk back a little bit, but at the same time, maybe they're afraid to be a leader for what actually works. That's what I believe. They got some special interests there who really aren't interested in doing things that help everybody.
And you know, both Carl and I have written for years that when we give massive sales tax breaks to companies like Spirit and the others, don't pick on Spirit in particular, because like you said, they have a fiduciary duty almost to go after this type of stuff. But those costs have to be paid by somebody when the tax base doesn't grow. It's paid for by the young and the new companies, the entrepreneurial, companies, a lot of them are going to fail, but a couple of them are going to go and become Pizza Hut, or like up in Johnson County, Garmin or Coleman or somebody like that. We can't identify who those companies are. Otherwise, we could make
Yes.
bets and, become fabulously rich like Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos of Amazon. We don't know who those companies are, so we need to have a good growing soil for all sorts of companies to experiment.
That's absolutely right. That's why I've tried to focus on controlling spending. We've frozen the mill levy. We have a 0.6001 mill levy reduction coming in 2023.
And not all commissioners were in favor of that.
Not all commissioners were in favor, but this will apply to everyone. And the regulations that we've helped eliminate or make more reasonable applies to everyone. We don't have to pick winners and losers. We just create a level playing field, create a positive environment for those jobs to be created, and we just let the entrepreneurs and the small business do what they do best.
Okay. Well, Richard Ranzau, we are out of time for today. Carl, thanks for your input there. I wish that someone from your opponent, Hugh Nix, or a representative of his, or someone from the Wichita Chamber of Commerce PAC would have come, but they didn't. So I think we did the best we can. Thanks very much. I'm Bob Weeks. Thank you, the viewer, for watching this week, and we'll be back again next week.